right, folks, we're on for the better part of an hour. My name is Hal Taussig, and we have had a bunch of text all week long already, and it is about the bigger, and way big Bible. That is much bigger than the Bible. So we had 8 hours on Thursday in which we studied 12 parts of the new Bible from the 2nd and 3rd century. And we're supposed to do the same thing in this hour. In other words, that's what they said, and of course I know that that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do a bunch of different of the new Bibles, and one of the ways of thinking about that is the book that I wrote about 10 years ago, and it's called A New Testament. This is all over the world and all over the country. The second stage here is a Bible for the 21st century, combining traditional and newly discovered texts. So that's what we're going to be talking about now. It turns out, some of you know this, that in the 1st and 2nd century, there were 150 new parts of the Bible, but nobody put in. In other words, many of these texts were being read in very exciting ways. But the New Testament, as I hope many of you know, only began in the 5th century. In fact, the 5th century was the first time there was really a Bible going, and it wasn't complete. So what happened was, in the 20th and 21st century, a whole bunch of people went to the Near East and found all kinds of new new texts from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century. And we found it all, 150 of them. I can tell you that when this book went across the country for 10 years, what happened was the big kind of big professors, not only professors, but people who put out big time texts, they had so many people wanting to buy this text, and here what we did, I worked for over a century with professors from all over in a decade, yeah. And that really has been so important for the lives of people in our time. So today we're going to begin to think where a whole bunch of wonderful things are happening to people because of a new Bible. In other words, a Bible for the 21st century, combining traditional and newly discovered texts. So we'll talk about some of that. I've got some of that you can read if you want, but I'm going to mostly talk with you about it. So let me start with the first one. Here's a bunch of them. This is called, how many of you know the Gospel of Mary? Isn't that amazing? About half of you know, on some level, the Gospel of Mary from more or less the 2nd century. So let me tell you the main thing. I can't tell you enough, but there's a real important set of things that happened in the Gospel of Mary, and it turns out that it is a Mary from the 1st or 2nd century. The thing is that we don't know which Mary. It's just called Mary. And it was from the 1st or 2nd century. So this is a Mary who knows Jesus just about before Jesus died. And this Mary, just before Jesus died, and then after Jesus died, had an appearance with Jesus. And then he went away forever. And here is what Mary said about Jesus. When the Blessed One had said these things, he greeted them, saying, "Peace be with you. Bear my peace within yourselves. Beware that no one lead you astray, saying, 'Look over here,' or 'Look over there.' For the child of humanity is within you." Look over here, look over there, for the child of humanity is within you. Follow it. Those who seek it will find it. Go then and proclaim the good news in it. Go then and proclaim that good news. Do not lay down any rules beyond what I determined you. Not any law like the lawgiver, lest you be confined by it. When he had said this, he departed. This was the end of Jesus in the presence of Mary. Mary comforted the other people around Jesus, but they were pained. They wept greatly and said, "How shall we go to the nations and proclaim the good news of the child of humanity? If they did not spare him, how can they spare us?" Then Mary stood up. So this was a Mary who didn't stop. She stood up to the other people around Jesus. "How shall we go to the nations and proclaim the good news of the child of humanity?" She greeted them all and said to her brothers and sisters, "Do not weep and be pained by doubt, for all his grace will be with you and shelter you. But rather let us praise his greatness, and he has praised us and made us humans." When Mary said this, she turned their hearts to the good, and they began to discuss the words of the Savior. So the rest of this story is about Mary taking over the leadership. When's the last time you heard that in church? This is a story right at the beginning of the Jesus movement in which Mary says, "Follow me." And she said over and over again what they all need to be about. And basically, Jesus is no longer there. Except, as she said, he is a spirit for them. And they should be with him in spirit. Now, the rest of this story about Mary has to do with what one might call the disciples, except she nor Jesus called them disciples. You need to know in the New Testament, the word disciples is not the right Greek word. That word means basically people who are together with one another. And they are in that way. But what happened then with the disciples who weren't quite sure whether Mary was real or good, they said that she was not good enough for them or Jesus. And only one of the people from the movement, only one of them stood up for her. And that was that was basically one of them that was not the real big person. Then Mary said, "Please all come forward and be together among all of the people." And so one of them actually did that. None of the rest did. Well, that's not quite true. There are two versions of this text. I have it both. One says only one follower of Jesus went with her out into the rest of the world. The other says all of them did. It's not clear. So this is just a beginning, and you know that there are 150 of books like this, as I'd said. And you can find all of them in our day. I want to read one or two more here, and this is a story that is called Oh, it's in here, sorry. Do you have the, yeah, oh, yes, thank you. So this is from another story from the same places that were found in the Yes, right. This text is called the second book of the Odes of Solomon, because the person who picked it up in the 21st or 20th century gave it a new name because it didn't want to. The person who caught that in the old country said, "No, I can't call this Jesus." And instead, it was called Solomon. But we'll see that it really is clearly about the Jesus movements. And let me read you a little part of this. Here is the Ode 37 of the Odes of Solomon. 36, excuse me. This is in the word of, we think probably Jesus, spoken in the first word. This person, who's never named Jesus, says, "I rested on the Spirit of the Lord, and she raised me up in the high places, and she caused me to stand on my feet in the high places of the Lord, before his fullness and splendor, while I was proclaiming in the preparation of his odes, he gave birth to me before the face of the Lord. And while I was the child of humanity," so this person calls himself the child of humanity, "because I was glorified but among the glorious and first among the great ones, for she made me according to the greatness of the Most High, and she renewed me according to his renewal, and anointed me from his fullness. I became one of those who are near him, and my mouth was opened like a cloud of dew, and my heart gushed with a mountain of justice, and my access was through peace, and I was set up in the spirit of instruction." Hallelujah. So this Odes is clearly not about, it is not about Solomon. It's about this was written in the first or second century, and is now still here with 40 odes about the people of Jesus and Jesus. Notice, of course, that this is in this word from Jesus, the person mainly that is really pointed to is the woman. So also, just let me notice how much these texts from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century were so much about women who are leaders. So let me stop for a moment. I've only got 150 more for us to talk about. But I would like you to say out loud what you're making of these first two texts. what's wrong with them, what makes sense to them, in them. I mean, I've worked on this for 25 years, so you're not going to make me mad. Yes.
I love it. I've never heard these things, so I'm learning. Mary and the second Ode of Solomon says here that I was a child of humanity. I was glorified among the great ones, made in accordance with the Most High. So it talks about that I was made in accordance with the Most High and glorified among. The language is very much of heavenly language. There's this pantheon of gods or a heavenly thing going on. Is all of that Ode of Solomon about Jesus being part of this godly presence? Is that what it's all about, or is it about something else too?
That's a really very helpful question. It feels to me like most of these texts are not highly as high as what we think the Bible is. It's a much more amount of people together being very intense about who they are and what it means. You notice in Mary, it was about being human. That was what Jesus said we are. Other thoughts. I'd love to have somebody say, I hate this. I don't. Yes. Here we go.
I have a two-part question. I'm a reader and follower of The Cottage, Diana Butler Bass, and recently she did a talk on Mary Magdalene. Some very interesting things about Mary Magdalene's influence and power in her relationship with Jesus. So I'm not shocked to hear anything like this. The other thing is that I'm studying in a contemplative prayer group passages from Douglas Neal Klotz in translations from Aramaic, which is mind-blowing and changes a lot of things that I've thought about the scriptures. So this is very interesting, and thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Other thoughts, questions?
Could you talk a little more about these texts, where they were discovered, what how we found them? I'd love to know more about the background.
And that will only also take about 4 years. Yeah, because it came from so many different places, and by and large, it was in the first 3 or 4 centuries. These were simply read by regular people. Yes, well, Nag Hammadi is the word for the first 51 of them, and then the rest of them took about 150 years. This is all. None of this is in books. It is in basically really very thin paper from basically very heavily parched paper so that you can write it down. And by and large, all of this was found in the 20th century. Well, all over the place. And I should say, some of it was actually found, we know that some of it was written in in the they found it in the 18th century was the first time, and what happened there was really interestingly, the Europeans got rich in the 19th century, and because a whole bunch of them were rich, they went on vacation to basically in Africa and in Asia, and they found a bunch of that stuff nearby there, and so and then basically then a whole bunch of professors in Europe and in America went for the next 70 years to these parts of Africa and Asia, and found more of that. And so many of those were found that we still haven't gotten any more than 150. Excuse me? Yeah, translations we have. So I've been working on translations, and a lot of people have. Most of it is in Coptic from Africa, and that's mainly because it's so warm in Africa, in northern Africa, that most of the other stuff gets basically it falls apart. But if it's in Africa, it's warm enough that it doesn't get like it does in Europe and other places. So I want to give another text that many people say they find the best new text that is found in this kind of way. And do you all know the Thunder Perfect Mind? Some of you do, yes, right, very important. I'm gonna, on Thursday, we had about 50 people in a room for 8 hours, and we read the Thunder Perfect Mind. Anybody here that was there? So I'm going to read this a bit, probably not all the way because it would be the rest of the time together for us. This is a text by a divine female, all written down. I was sent out from power. I came to those pondering me. I was found among those seeking me. Look at me, all you who contemplate me. This is a divine woman. Audience, hear me. Those expecting me, receive me. Don't chase me from your sight. Don't let your voice or your hearing hate me. Don't ignore me any place, any time. Be careful. Do not ignore me. I am the first and the last. I am she who is honored and she who is mocked. I am the whore and the holy woman. I am the wife and the virgin. I am he, the mother and the daughter. I am the limbs of my mother. I am a sterile woman, and she has many children. I am she whose wedding is extravagant, and I did not have a husband. I am the midwife, and she hasn't given birth. I am the comfort of my labor pains. I am the bride and the bridegroom. And it is my husband who gave birth to me. Notice that this is basically a poem, pretty long one, and notice that the entire poem is spoken by a divine, by and large, female. There are 43 explicit females and 7 explicit male voices. There are 3 bi males and 1 bi woman. She says, I am my father's mother, my husband's sister, and he is my child. I am the slave woman of him who served me. I am she, the Lord of my child. I am the staff of his youthful power, and he is the baton of my old womanhood. Whatever he wants happens to me. I am the silence never found, and the idea infinitely recalled. I am the voice with countless sounds and the 1,000 guises of the word. I am the speaking of my name. Pay attention to me. I am she who is disgraced and she who is important. Pay attention to me, to my impoverishment and to my extravagance. Do not be arrogant to me when I am thrown to the ground. You will find me among the expected. Do not stare at me in the shit pile, leaving me discarded. You will find me in the kingdoms. Do not stare at me when I am thrown out among the condemned. Do not laugh at me in the lowest places. Do not throw me down among the slaughtered viciously. I myself am compassionate. I myself am compassionate. Watch out. Do not hate my compliance and do not love my constraint. In my weakness, do not strip me bare. Do not be afraid of my power. Why do you despise my fear and curse my pride? I am she who exists in all fears and in trembling boldness. Let me read that again. This is what she says about herself. I am she who exists in all fears and in trembling boldness. I am witless and I am wise. The previous 10 verses, and I'll stop here because we're only a third of the way done. These last 10 verses are the divine female, but in a striking character in that she is consistently, often broken, disgraced, in a shit pile, threatened with slaughter, laughed at, and existing in all fears. Quite a picture of divinity. But also a complex picture of divinity in that she is important, extravagant, and in Trembling, Boldness. She continues to be this kind of complexity. I have to muse that she is quite a bit like Jesus. Notice how much Jesus and she got beaten up and had power. Although I would want to say probably she goes before Jesus. That is, she's more of this kind of person than he is. So again, we spent almost 3 hours on Thursday thinking this through. And I have to say, those of you who were here, or were at on Thursday, people were deeply involved in who she was and deeply hurt by how much difficulty she had. Questions or thoughts?
Yes. First of all, thank you for your work. Mm-hmm. And second of all, looking at a broad picture of this, I understand that there is so much of this about the Christianity perhaps we never tried, with a more feminine aspect and these kinds of pieces. My question for you is, as a whole, what are the correctives or the additives that we should take away from these old, new pieces of our scriptures as we look at our faith holistically?
Thank you so much. I just want to tell you what the person who basically runs this place, after we did it for the first time last year, and what he said is, you have to do this again and again to make the Bible better. That's who makes this place run. And the thing he wanted to say most is, go for 8 hours next year. So that's the big thing here. Yes.
So it's interesting you say that, because what I would think is, like, maybe what we should be doing is preaching the limitations of the Bible, right? Instead of trying to make it, like, it has done so much damage. I hear that when I was listening, and I'm a pastor, I'm educated in a seminary, right? It's the first time I've heard that. And I just was like, this is Christ consciousness. This is an experiential understanding of the divine. This is an acknowledgement of creation all around you. How Christ arrives in the despised and the despicable, in the kingdom, at the thrones. This is what Christ consciousness is. We made Christ into one man who died on a cross for our sins so we can get into heaven. But this is about opening up Christ consciousness. And I think we have to do that outside of the Bible, because the Bible has really limited Jesus too. Those are just my thoughts.
Thank you. Just to say that what I know about this book is it made me lots of money, but I don't care about that. But it also is, it means so much to so many people, thousands, hundreds of thousands, in my experience. So it feels to me as if the head of things around here is still on a roll. And I should also tell you all what I'm doing at the moment. I'm working right now for the Los Angeles Times. They have asked me to put an op-ed in September for the entire country, and they've asked me if I could identify 5 new Christianities in our time, and we have decided that one of them is here.
So I had a question going back to the poem that you were reading. And one of the things that stuck out to me, one of the phrases was, I was here in the beginning and I will be here in the end. And it reminded me of the book of John, where it starts talking about the Logos. And how does the idea of the Logos, is there any connection to this text?
I would say that by and large, the Gospel of John is the most powerfully minded in the New Testament, and that most of these things are a little bit more complicated, and I would say a little bit more in fear and in trembling boldness.
I was struck by the gender references. Mm-hmm. Particularly, I assume that the people who compiled the New Testament we've grown up with were all patriarchal, very, very deeply embedded in that system. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the gender issues, but also I'm wondering if you saw non-binary gender references as well, because in our culture we have female, male, and then we try not to, acknowledge other genders, but other conceptions of gender.
That's so helpful. Thank you. The first thing I want to say about the way I, with a whole bunch of people who worked with me in student form and other professor forms, we wanted to make sure that how we were working with, say, the texts in their initial phases. We did not want, for instance, we refused to make the people women when they weren't. In other words, we wanted this to be a real translation. So everything I read so far today, it was some men, but a lot of women. And we said, there were maybe about 50 of us working full time on all of this stuff. And we said, we can't make it up. We have to be conservative in our knowing what we're reading. And because we found so many times where somebody else makes up the Bible. And we were very careful about it. But what happened is, because the other texts were actually real in their realities about women. Now, it's very clear, as far as I'm concerned, that the Bible has tons of stuff in which women are really not honored. In the Bible very much has men playing the biggest roles. And I think that's very much the case, and and there's a deep problem for all of us, men and women, to make a different Bible, in that case, to see what we need to have. But I'm frankly at the moment really glad that I have such a complex thing that has lots of women that are beaten up. I mean, literally, we had her being beaten up. She's strong, but she's broken down. So, in other words, if you, for instance, if we read first, if we read First Thomas in the Bible, that is a horrible text. Timothy, I'm sorry. First Timothy, is so full of beating up the women, and that's in the real Bible. So I bet you have some more thoughts or questions that I haven't gotten to.
Hal, one thing that was asked about was the non-binary.
The non-binary.
Non-binary, so neither male nor female. You know, the non-binary stuff.
Yeah. Actually, the text we read with the divine woman is very complicated. I mean, you heard me say there are 43 divine women and 7 divine men, which in and of itself is an interesting thing, but that is complex. I think I don't want to admit this, but we only have 2 or 3 minutes left, so I'll take 10 questions. Any more thoughts? Yes, please. No, it is not. But this, in almost any big bookstore, it's only $14 for 600 pages. So another. I asked for this to be here now, and I brought 8 of these, but I said on Thursday, you can't have these, so I'm sorry. Time's up. Okay. Thank you so much. Great to be together with you.